Ava sat huddled beneath the ancient oak, her small frame almost swallowed by the gnarled roots that twisted like dark veins into the earth. Her eyes, deep and haunting, traced the figures across the lush garden. Her mother, Sarah, radiant and tender, her smile soft as she brushed Miriam's hair, whispering words of love and pride. "You're my shining star," Sarah cooed, leaning in to kiss Miriam's cheek, her voice warm and reassuring. Miriam, cheeks flushed with innocence, giggled softly, clutching her mother's hand with a gleeful sparkle in her eyes. Meanwhile, Eva remained silent, her gaze fixed on the scene with a mixture of longing and icy detachment. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting golden patches that flickered over her face, highlighting the shadows flickering behind her eyes. Her small fists clenched the dirt, nails digging into the soft earth as her mind twisted with a storm of unspoken emotions. She watched as Miriam's laughter bubbled up, filling the air with a joyous melody that seemed to echo mockingly in her ears. Sarah turned suddenly, her gaze sweeping the garden, and her gaze landed on Eva, who quickly lowered her head, pretending to be engrossed in the cracked stone beneath her. "Eva, my dear," Sarah called softly, walking toward her with open arms, her voice tender but distant, as if Eva existed on the other side of a glass wall. Eva flinched but said nothing, her small chest tightening with a rush of bitter envy. The world around her was a tapestry of vibrant colors and sweet scents, yet her little heart felt as if it were caged in shadows, invisible and unheard. She could hear Miriam's light laughter drifting her way again, and she clenched her jaw, feeling the weight of her silence pressing against her ribs. Her mind spun with images. Her mother's affection poured over Miriam like honey, her sister's bright future shining just beyond reach. She longed to speak, to demand, to claim what was her own. But no words came. Instead, she remained rooted, trembling slightly, as her eyes flickered with a flicker of dark resolve. The garden, with its fragrant roses and looming shadows, was more than just a place of beauty. It was a silent witness to her growing obsession, a sanctuary of secrets she dared not voice, yet which haunted her every breath. As her mother turned back to Miriam, praising her for her upcoming wedding, Eva's fingers brushed the dirt in a silent vow, one that would, in time, twist her innocence into something unrecognizable, something terrifying. The garden held her secrets, her jealousy, her fury, all buried beneath the tranquil surface, waiting patiently for the day her quiet despair would erupt into something far more sinister. During the family celebration, beneath the warm glow of flickering candles and the soft hum of quiet conversation, Eva's ears caught a hushed exchange between her parents, a conversation that would etch itself deeply into her consciousness. As her father chuckled softly at a joke shared across the table, her mother, Sarah, leaned in towards Miriam, her voice tender, yet imbued with a subtle pride that made Eva's stomach tighten. "Miriam, my beautiful girl, your kindness and grace truly shine tonight. I couldn't be more proud of the young woman you've become," Sarah cooed, her eyes crinkling with genuine affection as she gently brushed a stray lock of Miriam's golden hair behind her ear. Miriam smiled, her cheeks flushing with pleasure, and responded modestly, "Thank you, Mama. I just want to make you proud." Sarah's gaze lingered on Miriam with a luminous warmth that felt like a sharp blade slicing through Eva's chest. Her mother's voice grew softer, almost whispered, as she added, "You're everything I ever dreamed of. You're so different from Eva. More poised, more radiant. Your future looks bright, my dear." Eva's breath hitched painfully, her fingertips curling into fists beneath the table, trembling as her world spun with a mixture of confusion, fury, and an almost visceral ache of rejection. She watched as Sarah's hand rested possessively on Miriam's shoulder, the unspoken favoritism radiating from her like an unbreakable spell. Eva's eyes flicked to Miriam's face, noting the unearned glow of her sister's smile, the effortless beauty, the confident poise that Eva could never seem to grasp, no matter how desperately she tried. Her mind whirled with fragments of memories, Miriam's laughter echoing in the halls, Sarah's approving nods, her own silent yearning to be seen, loved equally, acknowledged. The moment stretched endlessly, the subtle but relentless tide of resentment swelling within her chest, threatening to overflow. As the scene played out, Eva felt her heart pounding so loudly she feared it would burst. A dangerous seed of jealousy rooted itself deep into her soul, whispering that her sister's happiness was a betrayal. An affirmation that she, Eva, was destined to remain in shadow, forever second, forever unseen. Her vision blurred as she clenched her jaw, her body frozen with a silent, simmering fury. She knew, with a clarity born of raw emotion and madness, that this evening would mark a turning point, one where her quiet suffering would no longer be contained, where the chasm of comparison and longing would erupt into something far darker than anyone could foresee. The garden, with its hidden corners and silent secrets, seemed to press closer around her, the scent of roses mingling with the bitter taste of betrayal. As her mother's words continued to echo softly in the background, Eva's eyes darkened with grudging resolve, and her trembling hand brushed the dirt beneath the table in a secret trembling vow, one that would soon twist love into obsession and innocence into something unrecognizable. Eva's fingers trembled as she slipped her hand into the narrow drawer of her mother's antique dresser. The faint scent of lavender and old paper filled her nostrils, mingling with the sharper tang of her pounding heartbeat. She had seen the drawer slightly ajar earlier that day. Now, driven by an unrelenting curiosity she couldn't suppress, she pushed it open just a little more. Inside, nestled among faded handkerchiefs and yellowed photographs, lay a small leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and dull from years of neglect. Heart-pounding, Eva's eyes darted around the dim room before she grasped it carefully and pulled it into her lap. Her breath hitched as she opened the cover, revealing elegant, looping handwriting. The first page was a simple date, her mother's, she realized, and beneath it the words, Miriam's Day, written with a flourish. Her eyes widened as she began to read, words that cut like glass. Today Miriam looked especially radiant. Her smile lights up the room, and Sarah's eyes are brighter when she's with her. I worry that Eva feels left behind. She's been quiet lately, more withdrawn. Eva's chest tightened at the words, sinking deeper into the corner of her mind, where doubts and fears festered. Her mother's words continued, each phrase carefully, revealing her favoritism, small, intimate comments about Miriam's grace, her achievements, her charm. Miriam's voice is softer, more engaging, Sarah wrote. Eva's silence makes me worry. She's so reserved, so distant. I hope she'll find her own light someday. Eva's fingers clenched the leather cover, her nails digging into the worn surface. Her eyes flicked over to the pages filled with subtle but relentless comparisons, each one a dagger aimed at her fragile sense of self. Eva's eyes are too guarded, too serious. She hides her feelings behind a mask of stoicism, but I see the struggle behind her eyes. Her mother's handwriting grew softer, more indulgent when describing Miriam. Miriam's laughter is contagious, her kindness genuine. She has such a natural poise. I can't help but feel proud, and a little guilty, for loving her more. Eva's breath hitched as her mind replayed those words, the sting of their truth sinking deep. She watched her reflection in the mirror. Across the room, her own face pale and tense, little more than a shadow of her sister's radiant smile. Her grip on the journal tightened as her thoughts spiraled, an obsessive fire igniting behind her eyes. That's when the doubt turned into a seed of obsession. Her mother's tone shifted subtly on the next page, the handwriting slightly uneven, as if written in haste. Eva's progress is slower, but I believe she's capable of better. I worry she's lost in her own world, too much in her head. Eva's vision blurred with tears that threatened to spill. Her chest heaved as she fought to steady her trembling hands. "She's always hiding something," she whispered fiercely, to herself, clutching the journal to her chest as if it were a sacred relic. The words, the tone, the very ink seemed to suffocate her with their silent accusations. It was as if her mother's love had been carefully, deliberately documented. An unspoken hierarchy etched into each page, each sentence a reminder that Miriam occupied a place her sister could never reach. In that dark, silent room, Ava's mind spiraled further into obsession, her heart pounding with a mixture of betrayal and furious determination. She pressed her trembling lips into a thin line, her eyes darkening with a resolve that bordered on madness. If she could find proof of her own worth, if she could control even a fragment of her mother's affection, she thought, then perhaps everything would finally be different. Her fingers trembled as she closed the journal, the finality of its weight pressing into her palms. She knew, with chilling certainty, that this discovery was only the beginning, something that would haunt her, drive her, and ultimately lead her down the darkest path her mind could conceive. The secret buried in those fragile pages whispered promises of power, revenge, and a warped hope for love she believed she deserved, an obsession that would soon manifest in acts too horrific to comprehend. In the dim glow of late afternoon, Eva stood behind the lace curtains of their modest living room, her eyes fixed on Miriam as she carefully arranged her wedding dress, her delicate fingers trembling slightly. The air was thick with a mixture of admiration and envy that she couldn't quite contain, a relentless ache twisting in her chest. Miriam, radiant in her innocence, brushed a stray curl behind her ear and looked into the mirror with a dreamy smile, unaware of Eva's piercing gaze. Sarah, their mother, hovered nearby, adjusting Miriam's veil with a tender smile, whispering words of love and pride that seemed to echo louder in Eva's ears than in reality. "You'll be the most beautiful bride, Miriam," Sarah cooed softly, her eyes shining with maternal devotion. Eva clenched her fists, feeling the sting of their attention. How Sarah's gaze lingered longer on her sister, how the community's whispers seemed to orbit Miriam like a star. She watched Miriam's reflection, her face bathed in the golden light, and felt her own world narrowing into a dark tunnel of longing and resentment. Her mind spun with dark thoughts. She imagined slipping into Miriam's place, claiming that love and admiration for herself, tearing down the fragile illusion of happiness that seemed to surround her sister. Quietly, Eva moved closer to the doorway, her breath catching as she overheard Miriam giggle softly with Sarah, talking about their future, about love, about life. "Do you think Mom will love me more once I'm married?" Miriam asked, her voice innocent, yet carrying a subtle note of expectation. Sarah's reply was gentle but firm. "You're already the apple of her eye, sweetheart. Nothing will change that." Eva's heart thudded painfully at that statement, a bitter taste rising in her throat. She pressed her palm against the cold wall, eyes narrowing as her dark thoughts coiled tighter. She couldn't stand the way Miriam's happiness seemed to overshadow her, the way Sarah's affection poured so freely onto her sister like sunlight. That evening when Miriam finally left the room to prepare for her final fitting, Eva lingered, her gaze lingering on the mirror. She saw her own reflection, hollow and almost unrecognizable, and clenched her jaw. Soon, she whispered to herself, voice trembling with a mixture of dread and determination. Soon I'll make them see how much I deserve their love. The shadows deepened as she moved to her own corner of the room, her mind already weaving dark plans, her eyes flickering with an unsettling mix of obsession and a hunger that would eventually devour everything, and everyone she loved. On a night cloaked in the thick silence of the house, Eva moved like a shadow, her footsteps muffled by the plush carpet, as she slipped into Miriam's room with a breathless mixture of anticipation and dread. The moonlight seeped through the heavy curtains, casting silvery pools across the bed where her sister slept peacefully. Unaware of her sister's dark intentions, Eva's eyes flicked across the cluttered bedside table. Carefully, quietly, she rummaged through Miriam's belongings, her fingertips trembling as they brushed against delicate trinkets and folded letters. Her gaze landed on a stack of photographs, snapshots frozen in time, showing Miriam beaming at family gatherings, smiling with friends, her face aglow with youthful innocence. Eva's heart pounded harder, each beat echoing like a furious drum inside her chest. She clutched one photograph close, her fingers curling around the worn edges, as a surge of rage and despair flooded her senses. Suddenly, her hand froze upon discovering a sealed envelope tucked beneath the photos. With trembling fingers, she tore it open, revealing a letter written in Miriam's neat handwriting, the ink slightly smudged as if hurriedly scrawled. Ava's eyes darted across the words, which bled with emotion. Miriam's farewell, her plans to leave the city, to start anew, severing ties that Eva believed tethered her to a world that favored her sister's light while she remained in shadow. "She's leaving us," Eva whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fury and pain. Her mind spiraled into chaos, visions of abandonment, betrayal, and her own sense of worthlessness, twisting in a maddening whirl. She clenched her jaw, voice barely a whisper trembling from her lips. "She's planning to escape. She's going to leave us all behind." Her nails dug into her palms as she stared at the letter, eyes burning with a storm of jealousy and paranoia. Every fiber of her being screamed that Miriam's departure would finally strip her of her last chance at love and acceptance, that her sister's promises of freedom were actually a betrayal, a breach of the sacred familial bond. As her breathing grew ragged, Eva's mind conjured twisted images. Miriam walking away forever, her smile turning cold in her absence, her fists clenched tighter, trembling with a mixture of rage and despair. "No," she muttered under her breath, voice hoarse. "This isn't right. She's going to leave us, and I won't let that happen." Slowly, she reached out and snatched Miriam's pillow, pressing her face into it as tears blurred her vision. Her heartbeat thumped loudly in her ears, every sensation heightened. The scent of her sister's lavender soap, the feel of the soft fabric against her cheek, the distant whisper of her name echoing in her mind. In that moment, Ava's fragile psyche cracked open, revealing the depths of her obsession. An obsession fueled not just by jealousy, but by an unyielding fear of abandonment, a terror that her love was never enough, and that Miriam's departure would finally prove her unworthy of affection. As she withdrew into the darkness, her thoughts darkened further, plotting, scheming, her mind twisting Miriam's innocence into a symbol of betrayal. The room seemed to close in around her, the shadows whispering promises of vengeance. And Eva, trembling yet resolute, knew that her night of trespass was only the beginning of a far more sinister journey, one that would forever change the fabric of her fractured family. During the tense family gathering, Eva's gaze fixed unwaveringly on her mother, Sarah, her voice trembling, but edged with an unsettling resolve. The room was thick with an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the faint crackling of the old heater and the muffled hum of distant conversations. Ava's fingers clenched the edge of her chair as she leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing with dark intensity. "Mom," she began softly, but her words pierced through the strained air like a knife. "Do you really think I don't see? You favor her. Miriam always gets everything. Your attention, your praise, your love. While I'm left in the shadows. Do you even notice what you're doing?" Her voice cracked, a hint of desperation bleeding into it. Yet beneath that, a dangerous undercurrent surged. Sarah's eyes widened, her face flickering with a mixture of guilt and discomfort, as she reached out trembling hands, trying to soothe her troubled daughter. "Ava, honey, that's not fair," she started, but Eva cut her off sharply, her voice rising just enough to command attention. "No, it's not fair," she echoed, voice trembling with a strange, almost unnatural calm. "It's never been fair. You pretend to love us equally, but it's all a lie. Miriam's perfect, and I'm just invisible to you. I've watched her smile at you, heard her whispering secrets, and it's like I don't even exist in your world anymore." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, yet her expression hardened, her jaw clenched as if bracing for a storm. "All I wanted was to be loved the same way she is, but you've given her everything, your time, your affection, while I was left to drown in the shadows of your neglect. And tonight, I've decided that I've had enough. I won't let this continue. I can't live knowing I'm nothing to you. So I've made my choice. I'm done pretending. I'm going to end it all. This pain, this unfairness, because it's the only way I see to finally be free from your favoritism." Her voice cracked again, but her expression grew colder, more detached, as she reached slowly into her pocket, her hand trembling only slightly as she clutched a small object, a knife, glinting ominously in the dim light. Sarah's face drained, of color, her voice rising in alarm. "Eva, no! What are you saying? Please, don't do this." But her plea was drowned out by the quiet, chilling resolve that now radiated from her daughter, a prelude to darkness that would shatter everything in its path. The room seemed to shrink around Eva, shadows creeping along the walls as she sat there, eyes fixed on her mother with a mix of love and hatred, her trembling hand ready to make the final cut. An act born from years of suppressed rage and deep, festering jealousy that had finally spilled over in a storm of destruction. In the stillness of the midnight hours, Ava moved like a shadow cast by her own fractured mind, her breath shallow and trembling as she descended the winding path through the overgrown garden. The moonlight spilled cold silver across the cracked stones and tangled weeds, illuminating the place where she had buried her mother, Sarah, and her sister Miriam, their graves concealed beneath a shroud of wild ivy and trembling moss, secrets buried deep within the earth. Her heart pounded with a ferocious mixture of guilt, fury, and an unshakable conviction that this was her only escape from the suffocating weight of her jealousy and rejection. She clutched the small cold object in her trembling hand, the knife she had meticulously cleaned and sharpened, its blade gleaming menacingly in the dark. Ava's eyes flicked over the garden's dormant shadows, her voice barely a whisper, as she rehearsed her plan. "They'll never hurt me again. No more being second, no more feeling invisible. Tonight I take back what's mine." She paused, her breath hitching as she recalled her mother's dismissive words, Miriam's laughter, the way her mother's gaze had always lingered on Miriam, as if she was the only one deserving love. The heavy silence was punctuated only by her own ragged breathing and the distant hoot of an owl. as if the night itself bore witness to her descent into madness. Ava moved quietly, crossing the uneven ground, her senses heightened. Each step, a careful act of defiance against the crushing despair that had gnawed at her for years. When she finally reached the graves, her hand tightened around the knife's handle, fingers trembling like leaves in a storm. Her eyes flicked between the darkened forms of her mother and sister, memories flooding her mind, moments of tenderness intertwined with the bitterness of neglect. "This is the only way," she murmured, voice thick with conviction, yet trembling with the weight of her own unraveling sanity. As she knelt beside the earth, her mind blurred with visions of everything she had lost and everything she desperately wanted to reclaim. Love, acknowledgement, a sense of belonging. Without hesitation, she plunged the blade into her coat pocket and reached for the fragile, crumbling soil, her hands trembling as she began to dig, the cold dirt scraping beneath her nails, the earth's damp scent rising up to her nostrils. Her breath caught as she imagined the moment her pain would finally end. Her torment dissolved into the silent soil, her act of destruction seeping into the shadows, an act born of obsession, driven by the unrelenting belief that her life could only be redeemed if she erased the sources of her suffering forever. The garden became her confessional, her final sanctuary, as she whispered, "Tonight I free myself." And with each shovelful of dirt, she buried her fears along with the bodies, sealing her tragic secret beneath the darkness of the night, convinced that in this act of violent love, she would finally find the peace she so desperately craved. On the designated day, Ava's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched her mother, Sarah, and her sister Miriam approach the secluded corner of the garden, each step deliberate and trembling with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wilting leaves, the late afternoon sunlight casting long, sinister shadows over the overgrown undergrowth. Ava, hidden behind the gnarled branches of an ancient oak, clutched the cold, rough handle of her shovel with trembling fingers, her other hand nervously gripping the blade she had hidden in her coat pocket, both instruments of her final act. Her breath hitched as she watched the two figures draw closer, Sarah's familiar, gentle voice attempting reassurance. "Come on, Miriam. She's probably just upset. Let's hear her out." Miriam, eager but cautious, nodded softly, her eyes flickering with curiosity and a hint of unease. Ava's eyes darted between her trembling hands and the figures ahead, her pulse pounding so loudly she feared they might hear it. She felt the sting of sweat sliding down her forehead, blurring her vision momentarily. Yet her mind was razor-sharp with obsession, her resolve unwavering. She clenched her jaw, her face a mask of quiet determination, as she took a slow, deliberate step out from behind the tree, the dirt crunching softly beneath her feet. Her voice, barely above a whisper, cracked as she called out, "Mom! Miriam! I need to talk to you." The sisters, startled, turned toward her, confusion flickering across Miriam's face. Sarah's brow furrowed, her voice tentative but firm. "Ava! What are you doing here? We're just—" Before she could finish, Eva's eyes glinted with a mixture of pain and fury. She stepped forward, clutching the shovel in one hand, the blade in the other, her voice trembling, but resolute. "I've been waiting for this moment. I need you both to understand. I can't keep pretending. I'm tired of being invisible, of loving you so much I drown in it, and still never be enough." Her words hung in the air like a noose, thick, with unspoken rage and longing. Her trembling hand moved swiftly, as if driven by a force beyond her control, raising the shovel. "Tonight, I'm going to make everything right," she whispered fiercely, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, her voice cracking as she lunged forward, the world narrowing to the swift, brutal motion of her strike. An act born of obsession, desperation, and an unrelenting need to erase her pain once and for all. As Sarah and Miriam stepped cautiously through the overgrown path that led to the secluded corner of the garden, Eva's presence suddenly materialized from the shadows, a strange, unsettling smile fixed on her face. Her eyes, cold and unwavering, flickered with a calculated calmness that belied the storm raging inside her. "Oh, look who's finally here," Eva greeted softly, her voice eerily sweet, almost mocking, as she took slow steps toward her mother. "And sister," her hands trembling only slightly as she clutched the jagged shovel behind her back. Sarah's brow furrowed, her voice tentative yet firm. "Eva! What are you doing here? We're just—" But Eva cut her off with a faint, empty laugh, the sound brittle and hollow. "I've been waiting for this moment," Eva whispered, her eyes darting between the two women. "I needed to see you both, to tell you something important, something that's been eating away at me for so long." Her tone shifted, a sinister undercurrent beneath her words. Suddenly her expression flickered, and her face twisted into a mask of fake remorse, the smile stretching too wide, too forced. "I'm sorry it had to be like this," she murmured, voice trembling with a strange mixture of sadness and fury. Then, without warning, she lunged forward, the shovel raised high above her head, her movements swift and ferocious. "You've always taken her side," Eva hissed, her voice trembling with a rage that seemed to consume her. Miriam's eyes widened in terror as Eva struck first, catching her off guard with a brutal blow that sent her stumbling backward, her scream muffled by shock. Sarah shrieked, trying to run, but Eva was faster, her instincts driven by a desperate, twisted love, a harbor of obsession that had long ago sank into madness. Eva's hand shot out, gripping Sarah's hair with savage strength, yanking her back before she could escape. "No one's going anywhere," Eva snarled, her face contorted with a feral hunger. The shovel came crashing down again and again, each blow more violent than the last, until Sarah collapsed, blood pooling rapidly beneath her trembling body. Meanwhile, Miriam, stunned and bleeding, fell to her knees, clutching her side as Eva's relentless assault turned her into a crumpled, helpless heap. The garden echoed with the sickening sound of flesh meeting brutal metal, Eva's breath ragged as her eyes flickered with a mixture of rage, despair, and something darker, an unholy resolve to erase her pain through destruction. When her mother's body finally lay still, Eva staggered back, her chest heaving, a hollow, hollowed look in her eyes. The garden, once a place of peace, now bore witness to her terrible act, her crime born of jealousy, obsession, and an unquenchable need to rewrite her shattered family. She dropped the shovel, her trembling hands clutching her head as she whispered to the lifeless forms beneath the tangled branches, "Now, finally, I'll be enough." In a frenzy born of pure desperation and mounting madness, Eva's trembling hands reached for her mother's hair as Sarah's desperate screams pierced the heavy, suffocating silence of the garden. "Eva, stop, please, don't do this!" Her voice cracked, fractured by fear and pain. But Eva's eyes burned with a frenzied resolve, her grip tightening as she dragged her mother backward, stumbling over tangled roots and broken twigs. The shovel, still crimson-stained from her earlier violence, clattered to the ground as Eva seized her mother's trembling shoulders, forcing her down onto the damp earth with a force that betrayed her trembling limbs. Sarah's voice grew frantic and shrill, "Eva, what are you doing? Please, I love you." But Eva's face was a mask of anguish mingled with the cold, unyielding desire to end the torment that had haunted her every waking moment. Her mother's pleas dissolved into muffled cries, as Eva grabbed handfuls of dirt, shoveling it over Sarah's trembling form. Each shovelful a desperate attempt to bury her pain, her jealousy, her sense of betrayal. "This is the only way," Eva whispered, voice trembling yet eerily commanding, as tears welled in her eyes and blurred her vision. She pulled the loose earth and decayed leaves over her mother's face, sealing her in an unmarked grave in the far corner of the garden, an act she believed would finally extinguish the relentless ache within her soul. Her legs buckled beneath her as she collapsed onto her knees, clutching her head, trembling from exhaustion and guilt, whispering brokenly, "It's over now. It's over. I'll be enough." The garden, once a sanctuary of peace, now bore the scars of her brutal act, twisted branches and freshly disturbed soil, bearing witness to her descent into darkness, her obsession morphing into a devastating reality she believed she could control. Even as her soul cracked irreparably beneath the weight of her own horror, Eva, trembling and drenched in sweat, moved with a quiet desperation that bordered on frenzy as she knelt beside her first grave, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The soil was loose and dark, damp from recent rain, and her fingers scraped against roots and stones as she shoveled handfuls of dirt onto her mother's trembling, pale face, murmuring frantic apologies beneath her breath. Tears blurred her vision, but she kept digging, her eyes flitting between the shallow grave and the second patch she had cleared nearby, an empty canvas awaiting its dark, tragic purpose. Her breath was shallow, ragged, each shovelful heavy with the weight of her guilt, her obsession, and the unrelenting need to conceal her sins forever. She whispered hoarsely, voice cracking with a mixture of grief and madness. "This has to be enough. No one will ever find out. I'll keep them hidden. No one will understand. No one can know what I've done." Her hands, trembling fiercely, reached for the second mound of earth, and she carefully exhumed Miriam's body, her fingers trembling as she lifted her sister's fragile form from its shallow grave. The girl's face was peaceful, almost unaware of the horror that had claimed. Her and Eva's stomach twisted violently. With trembling precision, she carried Miriam to her mother's grave, tears streaking her dirt-streaked face as she gently laid her sister down beside their mother, the two bodies now lying side by side, silent witnesses to Eva's twisted obsession. She moved with exaggerated care, as if trying to reverse her terrible deed, and began shoveling dirt over Miriam's body, pressing the earth down with trembling hands, whispering, "Stay close. Stay with her. I'll keep you safe now." When both graves were filled, Eva took a handful of small stones and arranged them carefully atop the freshly covered earth, creating a discreet marker, a subtle sign only she would recognize. Her heart pounded fiercely as she stepped back, eyes fixed on the graves, and with a trembling hand, she made a small, almost imperceptible mark at the entrance of the hidden burial site, a secret seal meant to hide her terrible truth forever. "They're safe," she whispered into the silent night, voice barely audible. "They're safe now. No one will ever find them. No one will ever know what I've done, and I'll finally be enough." Her fingers lingered on the rough stones, her breath hitching as her mind spun in a whirl of relief and terror, believing this act of concealment would finally erase the nightmare she had created, an eternal, silent testament to her obsession, buried beneath the earth she had dug with trembling hands, sealing her secrets deep within the dark, overgrown shadows of the garden. In the dim, sterile corridors of the reform school, Eva moved with an almost ghostly grace, her face composed into a mask of calm that concealed the chaos roiling beneath. Her dark eyes, cold and piercing, flicked subtly from the accusing glances of her peers to the stern expressions of the teachers, each gaze a reminder of the judgment she desperately sought to suppress. The other girls whispered behind their hands, their voices tinged with suspicion and fear, as Eva sat silent during group sessions, her hands resting calmly in her lap, her posture impeccable. A girl with trembling lips leaned forward, voice trembling as she whispered, "They say she's dangerous. That girl's got a darkness you don't see right away." Eva's eyes flickered with a fleeting flash of something unholy. Regret, perhaps, or a flicker of the memories she fought so fiercely to repress. And she simply nodded, her lips pressed into a thin, unwavering line, when a nearby teacher, a stern woman with a sharp, scrutinizing gaze, caught the whisper. She called out, "Quiet! No gossip here!" Her voice echoed sharply off the concrete walls, but Eva's expression remained unchanging, her silence as deliberate as her presence. She listened intently to the accusations, to the petty controversies that rippled through the dorms like dangerous ripples of unrest. Yet inside, her mind spun in a dark whirl. Her body was still, but her thoughts were a storm. Images of her buried secrets, the graves she had sealed, the shadows that clung to her like a second skin, the whispers of her classmates, the judging eyes of authority, faded into a distant hum as she focused inward, a quiet predator maintaining her carefully constructed facade. Every glance, every word was a threat, but Eva knew how to hide her true self behind the veneer of composed innocence. Behind her measured breaths, a sinister hunger simmered, waiting for the right moment to unleash again. When they finally moved on, whispering about her in hushed tones, Eva's face finally cracked into a faint, unsettling smile. A flicker of satisfaction buried deep beneath her calm exterior, and she whispered softly to herself, "They see only what I want them to see, but I am still the one in control." Her fingers brushed the edge of her sleeve, a subtle reminder of her internal darkness hidden beneath the quiet exterior she meticulously maintained. Each movement calculated, each glance a shield. In that quiet, oppressive space, Eva's mind was a labyrinth of shadows and secrets, her outward composure masking the storm that had only begun to simmer beneath the surface, waiting patiently for the moment when her silence would give way to darkness once more. In the suffocating shadows of her hidden chamber, Eva hunched over her tattered diary, each word a fragile act of rebellion against the storm roiling inside her. The flickering candlelight cast wavering shadows across the worn pages as she penned with trembling fingers, her handwriting jagged yet deliberate. "They think I am nothing but a ghost, a shadow lurking behind their love and favoritism," she wrote. Voice barely a whisper, voice thick with both fury and longing. "But I am the only one who truly sees. Miriam's laughter, Sarah's warmth. Those are chains I refuse to wear any longer." As her pen scratched across the paper, she paused, listening to the distant echoes of voices, whispering, taunting. Inside her mind, her breath hitched, and the room seemed to tighten around her, suffused with the scent of old paper, wax, and something darker, her own obsession. Then she heard it, a soft, insidious whisper curling through the silence. "You're right. Love isn't enough. They took everything from you. Only you can make it right. Only you can be the true daughter, worthy of their love." Her eyes fluttered shut, and she whispered back, voice trembling yet fervent. "Yes, I will show them. I will prove I am the only one left worth loving." Her hand trembled as she reached beneath her pillow. Retrieving a small, hidden blade, she pressed it to her wrist, eyes closing as a shiver ran through her. "They'll see," she murmured, a tear slipping down her cheek. "They'll see what I am capable of, because love, real love, demands sacrifice. And I will be the sacrifice they never deserved." The voices intensified, echoing her own distorted truths, convinced that her cruel act was an act of devotion, of justice. It was a symphony of madness, a twisted lullaby that lulled her further into her fractured world, where the lines between love and hatred blurred into a single, unstoppable force. As her blood mingled with ink, Ava's words grew darker, her conviction unshakable. This is my right. My love is the last, desperate act of a girl who has lost everything but her madness. In that dim, suffocating space, she believed her silence, her secret, was finally her salvation, even as the shadows within her grew deeper, waiting patiently for the next moment she would unleash her darkness anew. Years had passed since the dreadful night that haunted the small garden behind the Rosenberg estate, yet the air still felt thick with unspoken secrets when Ava was brought into the sterile coldness of the police station. Her eyes, once blazing with a dangerous intensity, now looked distant and hollow, as if her mind had folded in on itself, retreating into memories she barely acknowledged anymore. Her trembling hands fidgeted with the faded hem of her sleeve, as the detective, a weathered man with a graying beard and cautious eyes, leaned forward, voice low but steady. "Ava, I need you to tell me everything. The truth, the entire truth." A shiver ran down her spine as she finally exhaled, voice trembling but strangely steady, laced with a disturbing mix of relief and madness. "I killed them," she whispered, almost as if saying it aloud would make it less real, less irreversible. Her gaze drifted past the detective, into the shadowed corners of her mind. "My mother and Miriam, they were never truly mine to keep. I loved her, I swear I did. But her favoritism, her constant neglect, it ate away at me. I couldn't bear to watch Miriam take what I desperately needed. Her affection, her approval. I thought if I removed them, if I buried them where no one could find them, I would finally be free. That's why I hid them, both of them, in the garden. It's still there, I swear, just beyond that twisted hedge, beneath the moss-covered stones. The earth is soft and dark, just like I left it the night I finally snapped." Her voice cracked, tears welling up, but her expression twisted into a strange, almost euphoric smile. "I didn't mean to hurt Miriam, but she was in the way. She was so perfect, so loved, and I was nothing but a shadow beneath her shine. I took their lives because I believed that's what love demanded, that love required sacrifice, even if it meant ending everything. When I buried them that night, I felt both empty and alive, as if I had finally claimed what I thought I deserved. The garden knows, though. It remembers. And I think they know, too. My mother's eyes haunt me, and Miriam's voice whispers in the wind. That's why I can't let anyone take me away now. I had to tell you because the truth is buried beneath the roots, beneath the earth I caked with my own tears. And I want you to find them. The bodies, the evidence of my obsession, my madness. I buried them deep beneath the old oak, where the roots twist like the veins in my mind. It's all there. Just dig, and you'll see. I did it for love, my twisted, dark love. And I will carry that secret forever, even if it consumes me." Her voice faded into a trembling whisper as her eyes fluttered shut for a moment, the faintest trace of a smile lingering on her lips. Half relief, half madness, believing somehow that her confession had finally set her free. Beneath the tangled roots of the ancient oak that towered like a silent sentinel over the neglected garden, the earth had yawned open in quiet rebellion, exposing dark, untouched graves that seemed to breathe with their own haunted life. The investigators moved cautiously, their flashlights piercing the shadows as they brushed aside dirt and tangled vines, the air thick with the coppery scent of blood and earth, a scent that clung to their senses like a curse. When the first bones emerged, jagged and weathered, a collective breath caught in their throats. The shovel struck something solid, flesh perhaps, or the cold weight of what was buried long ago. And as the soil was heaved aside, the unmistakable form of a skeletal figure was revealed, partially cloaked in decayed fabric. Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd, but their eyes darted toward the distant figure perched on a crumbling bench, watching with an unsettling calm. Eva. She sat motionless, her face streaked with dirt and tears, yet her expression shimmered with a twisted serenity, as if the act of unveiling her darkness had lifted a stone from her soul. Her gaze fixated on the dark hole of the graves, a faint, unsettling smile curling her lips. "I told you they'd be there," she whispered, voice trembling but steady, as if confirming a secret she'd carried for years. Her eyes flicked back to the excavations with a disturbingly proud glint, a reflection of her belief that she had finally liberated herself from the suffocating weight of her guilt. Her confession, her truth, laid bare beneath the earth, just as she had planned. She watched as the bodies were carefully lifted from their grave, their bones glistening in the harsh beams, each fragment illuminating the depths of her obsession. "It's done," she murmured softly, almost inaudibly, as if speaking to the spirits of her victims. "Now everyone will know. The garden kept its secrets, but I finally brought them to light." Her lips curled into a faint, almost triumphant smile, an expression that blurred the line between madness and relief, believing that her act of concealment was also her act of liberation. In her mind, she had unearthed not only the bodies, but also her own buried conscience, finally exposed and laid bare for the world to see. Yet, as the investigators continued their grim task, and the earth swallowed the truth once more, Eva's gaze lingered on the graves, her thoughts drifting to the whispers of her mother's eyes and Miriam's voice carried by the wind. Reminders that her secret, like the roots of the old oak, ran deep and eternal, forever intertwined with the dark soil of her obsession. In her dimly lit cell, Eva sat hunched over, her restless eyes flickering with a haunting mixture of defiance and despair. Her trembling hands clutched a frayed piece of paper as she recounted her nightly visions to the psychiatrist, her voice trembling with a strange, almost melodic cadence. "They come to me," she whispered, her gaze drifting past the cold gray walls toward an unseen horizon where shadows danced. The spirits of her mother and sister, their faces twisted with silent accusation. "They always appear in the garden," she murmured softly, their bones shimmering under the moonlight, whispering for justice I cannot give. Her eyes widened as she spoke, hands trembling like leaves caught in a fierce wind. "Last night," Miriam's voice was so clear, so desperate. She begged me to remember what I did. She said, "Eva, you took us away, and now the earth keeps our secrets, but our souls still cry out." As she spoke, her fingers traced the air as if reaching for something unseen, a ghostly touch, her voice catching in her throat. "And my mother," she continued, voice cracking. "She's always there too, her eyes hollow but pleading, as if she's lost in the dirt, buried alive beneath layers of soil and regret. They haunt my dreams, whispering truths I can't escape." Her eyelids fluttered, and for a moment her face contorted with anguish, as if the visions had become tangible, pressing against her skull. "It's a sickness," she insisted, voice desperate. "A disease I never asked for. I see them. Miriam, Sarah. They reach out to me. begging me to undo what I've done, to make it right, but I can't. I'm trapped inside this nightmare, caught between the living and the dead, their faces etched into my mind like scars. They say I'm mad, she added softly, voice tinged with a bitter smile. But I swear I'm just sick. My mind's broken, shattered by what I saw and what I did. Her eyes darted to the shadows in the corner, her breath trembling as she pressed her forehead against the cold steel bars, whispering, I didn't mean to do it. I didn't. The room held its silence, heavy with the weight of her confession, as Eva's words drifted into the darkness, a confessional woven from madness and remorse, a testament to a soul forever scarred by a love twisted beyond recognition, haunted forever by the specters buried deep within her garden of shadows. In the dim, sterile room of the prison's therapy wing, Eva sat rigid in the battered leather chair, her eyes flickering with a chaotic mixture of defiance and despair. The therapist, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a gentle voice, regarded her cautiously. Eva, she began softly, we've been discussing your past, the things you've kept hidden. But I sense there's something more, something you haven't fully expressed. Eva's lips curled into a faint, trembling smile, her gaze drifting toward the flickering fluorescent light overhead as her fingers unconsciously traced the cold metal of the chain-link bars behind her. You want to understand, she whispered, voice cracking, why I did what I did. It wasn't just madness. No. Her voice faltered as she clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. It was love, she asserted suddenly, eyes blazing with a fervent intensity. My love for them, for my family, so desperate, so overwhelming, that I thought if I could just erase the pain of being the lesser, the outsider, I could finally be seen. I thought if I silenced Miriam, if I buried Sarah, buried them, both in that cursed garden, it would free me from this unbearable rejection. That somehow, I'd finally be their favorite, their only. I hated that I felt this way, jealousy burning inside me like a poison, and I fought it every day. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper, trembling with a mixture of rage and longing. I told myself it was an act of love, a sacrifice. I needed to make them see me, to reveal my love so pure that it could only be expressed through the ultimate act, death. I wanted to be their everything, even if that meant destroying myself in the process. And that's why I buried them, because in my mind, I was freeing them, freeing us all from the chains of favoritism, from the suffocating cage of family expectations. I thought I was rescuing us from the pain, from rejection, saving us from eternity as shadows in that garden. Her voice cracked into a sob, and she pressed her forehead against her knees, trembling as she whispered, I swear, it was my love that made me do it. A love so desperate, so all-consuming, that it turned into madness. I didn't want to kill out of hatred or anger. I wanted to be loved so badly that I thought sacrificing everything was the only way to get there, to finally be their favorite, to feel whole. That's why I confessed now, after all these years, because I realized that my obsession was a sickness, a disease I never asked for, and the only cure was to face the truth, no matter how terrible. My mind has broken, yes, but I swear, underneath it all, I was only trying to love in a way I thought was pure. As her words faded into a shuddering silence, the room seemed heavy with unspoken guilt and twisted longing, an unholy testament to a love that spiraled into nightmare, forever etched into her fractured soul. In the waning light of a neglected, Afternoon. Eva stepped cautiously through the tangled undergrowth of the overgrown garden, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of moss and fallen leaves that had claimed the sacred ground for years. The air was heavy with damp earth, and the scent of decayed blossoms, a haunting perfume that clung to her skin as she approached the concealed patches of disturbed soil. Her eyes, hollow yet fixated, lingered on the 2 makeshift graves she had dug herself, humble mounds, shrouded in wild vines and shadows, silent witnesses to her darkest act. She knelt slowly, her trembling hands brushing aside the tangled roots and overgrown weeds, revealing the fractured, weathered stones that marked the resting places of her mother and sister. She reached out, fingertips trembling as she traced the uneven contours of the graves, feeling the coarse roughness of dirt and the cold, hard truth beneath her fingertips. Her breath hitched, a shuddering gasp escaping her as she whispered softly, "This is where it ends, where I keep them close, even in death." Her voice cracked, trembling with grief and remorse, as she gazed at the earth she had once poured, her soul into hiding. The wind carried a whisper, almost like their voices, silent echoes of love and betrayal entwined, reminding her that these graves had become her final refuge, her sanctuary from the chaos within. She pressed her forehead against the cold, uneven mound of soil, eyes closing tight as tears welled and spilled, blurring her vision with a mixture of shame and longing. "Maybe," she murmured bitterly, "these are the only pieces of myself left, buried here, in the dirt I thought would save me." Her fingers dug into the ground, clutching at the earth as if trying to anchor her fractured soul to something real in a world that had turned so cruel. Slowly she rose to her feet, her silhouette trembling against the dying light, as she cast one last, lingering glance at the graves, their silence a testament to her obsession, a twisted memorial to love corrupted into madness. As she turned away, her shadow stretched across the tangled flora, merging with the darkening shadows of the garden, forever entwined with her haunting secret, that these graves, these buried parts of her heart, were the only way she could hold on to what she had destroyed, the only remnants of a love so desperately unreal it had devoured her entire being. In the dim light of her small, sterile room, Eva grasped the frayed edges of her tattered notebook and traced the worn paper with trembling fingers. Her eyes, hollow yet intense, flicked across the fragile pages, as if searching for some final truth buried within her chaotic thoughts. The faint scent of disinfectant clung to the air, mingling with the faint aroma of dried earth. Remnants of her past, her secret, her sanctuary. With a voice barely above a whisper, she began to write, her handwriting jagged and uneven, yet deliberate. "The garden is the only true thing left to me. It's where my soul still whispers, where I buried the pieces of myself I could never reclaim." Her breath hitched as she paused, eyes darkening with a mixture of pain and defiance, then continued, her voice trembling but resolute. "I thought that if I buried my shame and my rage there, the earth would swallow them, and I would find peace in the silence." She paused, biting her lip to steady her trembling, and then looked up, her gaze flickering to the small window where the faint glow of the dying sun seeped in, casting long shadows across the room. "This garden," she murmured softly, almost to herself. "It's the only part of me that remains untainted. The graves beneath the tangled roots. Those are my truth, my final confession." Her fingers brushed the pages, as if to embed her confession into the fragile paper, sealing her dark secrets with every word. "I buried my mother and sister there, in the same soil, because I couldn't bear the pain of losing them separately. The jealousy, the obsession, those were my terrible gifts. I thought I could control what I felt, But instead I turned love into darkness. Now, they're part of the earth, and I am part of it too. She closed the notebook gently, her eyes fixed on the shadows that danced across her cell, shadows that seemed to whisper of her sins and her unending remorse. Her voice cracked as she added softly, "Maybe the garden is the only place where I can truly be honest, where I can finally become one with what I've destroyed, and maybe, just maybe, find some twisted peace in knowing I can never escape it." Tears welled again, glistening in her eyes as she clutched the notebook to her chest, the weight of her confession heavy but strangely freeing in the suffocating silence of her confinement. In the fading light, the abandoned garden stretched out like a scar upon the earth, overgrown and wild, tangled weeds choking the remnants of once tended paths. Vines crept along broken stone borders, and wildflowers, bright splashes of yellow and purple, dared to bloom amidst the decay. The air was thick with the scent of damp soil, rotting leaves, and something metallic, a faint metallic tang that lingered like a wound. Shadows danced across the tangled undergrowth, flickering as if alive, whispering secrets only the dark could understand. Amidst this forsaken wilderness, a solitary figure moved slowly, her steps muffled by the thick grass. Ava's voice, soft, yet charged with a haunting intensity, echoed in the evening hush, her words spilling like a confession into the silent void as she knelt by a patch of disturbed earth. "I buried them here," she whispered, her trembling hands brushing aside the tangled grass to reveal the uneven soil beneath. "Mother and Miriam, my own flesh and blood, because I couldn't bear to see them apart, not when jealousy clawed through my veins, twisting everything into madness." Her eyes shimmered with tears, reflecting the last remnants of daylight, as she traced the outline of the shallow grave she had carved years before. "No one knew what I had done," she murmured, voice cracking. "I told myself it was love. Obsessive, sick love. But deep down, I knew it was hatred." She paused, fingers trembling as she pressed them into the dirt, feeling the cold, hardened earth beneath. "I thought if I buried them, I could erase the pain, silence the voices. They'd be nothing but bones and soil, swallowed by nature, forgotten." Her gaze lingered on the darkened sky, where stars began to pierce through the gathering gloom. "But the garden knows," she whispered, voice trembling with a mixture of remorse and defiance. "It keeps my secrets, holds my darkness close, like roots that run deep beneath the surface, unbreakable. I am their keeper now, bound to this place, this tomb of my obsession, and I will stay here, forever listening to the whispers of the earth as it mourns what I have lost and what I have become." As her words faded into the night, the wind stirred the weeds, an almost imperceptible sigh, as if